The Shroud of Turin is this amazing relic. At bottom, it's a piece of cloth. It shows a very faint sort of image of a crucified man. And the crucified man calls us to remember.
For generations, the Shroud of Turin has stood like a challenge etched into linen, an artifact that refuses to explain itself. Historians dismissed it as legend, skeptics labeled it deception, and believers swore it was the signature of a moment beyond human understanding. But when modern science turned its eyes toward the cloth, and artificial intelligence joined the investigation, something unexpected emerged. Was this created by nature, by human hands, or by an event we still lack the physics to describe? What truth is buried inside the threads of this ancient linen, and why has it remained beyond our reach for so long? A linen stranger in history's shadow. The Shroud of Turin is more than a relic. It is an intrusion, a linen stranger that has walked through centuries, refusing to tell anyone exactly what it is. 14 feet long, a little over 3 feet wide, woven in a herringbone twill that reflects light like ripples across quiet water. On this cloth rests the faint image of a man, extending front and back, full length, as though a body once lay within it, and then vanished without disturbing a single thread. The wounds read like a tragic biography written in blood and fibre, marks at the wrists where nails would penetrate, a darkened stain around the feet, a puncture-shaped void on the right side that resembles a spear entry, faint circles that look eerily similar to wounds inflicted by a crown of thorns. The man's face is neither dramatic nor theatrical. It appears calm, hovering on the cloth like a breath caught in midair, eyes closed, beard parted, hair falling in soft strands that seem to float slightly above the linen, as though the image and the fabric once occupied different distances. The earliest solid documentation arises in the 13th century France. A quiet village became a sudden pilgrimage site, its peace broken by crowds, clergy, merchants, and skeptics. Some stood in awe. Some accused the church of staging a spectacle. Some whispered fraud. The cloth travelled between owners, eventually secured by the House of Savoy and later placed in Turin in 1578. There, it entered a long watch that included nearly being destroyed in a chapel fire, surviving only because a firefighter shattered the protective glass and carried it into the night. Now, it lies within a climate-controlled case in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, flat, protected, studied, debated. But no event transformed the Shroud's mystery more than a single moment in 1898, when lawyer and amateur photographer Secondo Pia captured the first photographic negative. He expected a washed-out blur. Instead, the negative revealed a positive image, a startlingly clear human face staring directly back at him. Cheekbones, hair strands, the curve of the lips, details too precise for pigment, too dimensional for medieval artistry. This moment changed everything. Devotion became investigation, a relic became a puzzle, and the puzzle entered the modern age with a defiance that has outlived every attempt to categorize it. Throughout the 20th century, scientists descended upon it with determination and growing confusion. Chemists extracted fibers and tested them with reagents. Microscopes scanned each thread, revealing image discoloration confined to the uppermost fibrils, only microns deep, like a surface kiss of heat or oxidation. No pigment, no brush strokes, no binder, no penetration. Textile experts compared the weaving techniques to known ancient looms. Forensic analysts studied blood flow patterns and noted consistency with actual human crucifixion wounds. Pollen experts identified grains consistent with plants native to ancient Judea. Each discovery added weight, but never closure. The Shroud kept offering just enough truth to demand another test, and just enough ambiguity to escape every conclusion. And then came the controversy that nearly fractured the entire narrative. It was neither painting nor sculpture, neither relic nor forgery. It simply was, a linen stranger in history's shadow, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. The War for the Calendar, Science versus Time Itself. Radiocarbon dating in 1988 promised to end the debate. 3 top laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, used a standardized protocol. A sample was cut from the same corner and divided among the labs. The results appeared decisive. An origin between 1260 and 1390 AD. A medieval creation, a masterpiece of deception or artistry. The world accepted the verdict. Headlines declared the mystery solved. Museums relaxed. Skeptics celebrated. Even many believers fell silent. But science did not remain silent for long. That corner, chosen for convenience and preservation, became the most examined artifact fragment in human history. Textile chemist Raymond Rogers later demonstrated that the threads in the corner sample had chemical signatures distinct from the original linen, cotton fibers blended with linen and residues consistent with medieval reweaving techniques used after the 1532 fire. Infrared and chemical tests suggested that the region contained repairs invisible to the naked eye. If the sample was not original, the radiocarbon date was not valid. That single premise, simple, almost childlike in its logic, became the fault line that divided laboratories, historians, chemists, and textile experts for more than 3 decades. It seemed unthinkable at first that a high-profile scientific test performed by 3 world-class radiocarbon labs could rest on a corner of cloth that did not represent the whole. Yet, the more researchers studied that region, the more anomalies accumulated. The defenders of the 1988 study remained steadfast. Their confidence rested on protocol. Samples were cleaned, treated, and inspected under microscopes before being reduced to carbon for measurement. Contaminants, they argued, had been thoroughly removed, but critics pointed out a flaw in that argument. Contamination only applies to foreign material sitting on a sample. If the fibers themselves were not original, if later threads had been woven directly into the fabric, the cleaning process would remove nothing, because there was nothing to clean. A medieval repair thread would not behave like dirt. It would become the cloth. This possibility gained momentum when textile chemist Raymond Rogers examined preserved fibers from the sample region. He found cotton interwoven with linen, microscopic traces of dye where no dye should be, and chemical signatures inconsistent with the rest of the cloth. Rogers argued that the sample appeared to come from an area affected by an invisible reweave, an expertly executed repair technique practiced in medieval Europe. If true, the laboratories had not dated the shroud. They had dated the mended corner. Meanwhile, other researchers turned to entirely different scientific methods, hoping to circumvent the radiocarbon impasse. X-ray scattering analysis, which measures the natural degradation of cellulose structures over time, produced estimates that consistently leaned older than the medieval period. Some readings suggested late antiquity, centuries earlier than the radiocarbon results. Critics argued environmental conditions such as humidity, heat, or smoke exposure could distort cellulose aging rates. Supporters countered that no dating method exists in isolation, and what mattered was the direction of convergence across independent techniques. Pollen research added another layer of complexity. Under microscopes, investigators identified grains from plants native to the Levant, species that flourished in the Judean desert and regions around the Jordan River, flora unlikely to appear in medieval Europe unless the cloth had traveled extensively. DNA sequencing of dust and fibers revealed genetic traces from multiple geographic origins: Mediterranean, Near Eastern, European, and even North African. This suggested a long history of movement, reverence, pilgrimage, and exposure, hardly the footprint of a stationary medieval forgery. None of these findings proved the shroud's authenticity. None established its age with precision, yet none aligned neatly with the narrative of a simple medieval creation. Instead, each new method expanded the mystery rather than resolving it. Evidence gathered around the cloth like sediment, each layer complicating the one before it. Then came the greatest barrier of all: access. Every scientific method demands samples. Every sample requires physical contact. But the shroud is not merely an archaeological artifact. It is a revered relic, a fragile textile nearly 2 millennia old, or merely 7 centuries old, depending on which evidence one follows. Custodians must protect it. Scientists must probe it. Between these two imperatives lies a tension so delicate it has halted entire research programs. Science asks for more threads, more fibers, more cross-sectional samples. History demands fewer hands, fewer risks, fewer incisions. The shroud hangs suspended between these instincts, unable to be freely touched or tested, yet forever inviting examination. This stalemate created a paradox. If the radiocarbon date was correct, then someone in the Middle Ages, an era without cameras, photography, chemical imaging, or any known technique capable of encoding three-dimensional spatial information, produced an image more sophisticated than any artwork of its time, or even centuries after. Such a feat would require methods history has never recorded and skills no artist has ever duplicated. If the radiocarbon date was wrong, then the cloth moves backward into a far broader, more contested historical landscape, early Christianity, 1st century burial customs, and regions where crucifixion was a Roman spectacle. Even then, authenticity is not guaranteed. It simply becomes possible. Into this uneasy landscape, where science hesitates, access is restricted, and centuries of debate hang unresolved. A new kind of instrument. An instrument that does not require touching the cloth, removing threads, or damaging relics. A tool with no reverence, no bias, no fear of error. Artificial intelligence entered the discussion like a witness called late in a trial, calm, tireless, and indifferent to the outcome. It did not care whether the shroud was ancient or medieval, sacred or fraudulent. It cared only about patterns, symmetries, signals, and anomalies. It looked where human eyes could not and measured what human judgment could overlook. And in doing so, it reopened questions many had believed were closed. Algorithms in the tomb when machines studied the unexplainable. Artificial intelligence entered the Shroud of Turin debate with none of the burdens that weigh on human minds. It carried no centuries of argument, no inherited reverence, no skepticism sharpened by academic rivalry. It did not approach the cloth as a relic or a fraud. It approached it as data, and data alone. Where humans saw a holy object or a questionable medieval artifact, AI saw pixel matrices, spectral values, mathematical gradients, and hidden structures waiting for illumination. The first phase of the machine's involvement began with the digitization of decades' worth of photographs. Images taken under incandescent light in the 1930s, high-resolution color captures from the 1970s and 80s, ultraviolet fluorescence photography, infrared reflectance scans, and multispectral datasets were all fed into neural networks capable of detecting patterns far too subtle for the human eye. AI does not blink. It does not grow tired. It does not care if the results destabilize history. Once the datasets were ingested, principal component analysis stripped the image into layers of variance. On each layer emerged relationships that no researcher had previously documented, mathematical patterns that repeated across the facial region, especially around the brow, nasal bridge, cheek contours, and chin. These were not artistic flourishes or brush-based curves. They were structural consistencies, as if the image obeyed a hidden rule. To test for optical illusions, scientists randomized sectors of the image. AI instantly lost the geometric coherence. When the original data was restored, the patterns instantly reappeared. This meant something critical. Whatever order existed within the shroud's image was not a byproduct of weave irregularities, camera artifacts, or pareidolia. It was intrinsic. Then, convolutional neural networks examined periodicity, the rise and fall of brightness values across the cloth. They found wave-like behaviors that were too regular, too harmonic, too mathematically disciplined to be natural discoloration. These waves did not correspond to the weave itself. They corresponded to depth. That discovery resurrected an old speculation. The shroud behaves like a topographical map. Before AI, early researchers noticed that if the image's brightness were translated into height, a three-dimensional face emerged, astonishingly proportional and anatomically consistent. But contact imaging should distort features. A cloth draped over the nose should flatten it. Cheeks should appear wider. The shroud showed none of these distortions. Instead, AI revealed a remarkable correlation. The darker the image, the closer the cloth had theoretically been to the body. The lighter the image, the farther the separation. This is not how paint behaves. This is not how dye behaves. This is not how heat transfer behaves. This is the behavior of distance mapping, an effect that implies some type of energy or field relationship between cloth and form. Yet, the greatest shock arrived when AI separated the blood-like stains from the body image. Using spectral decomposition, networks peeled away the darker areas consistent with hemoglobin signatures. Underneath, the geometric relationships remained unbroken. Blood and image were independent. Blood penetrated the fibers deeply. The body image did not. The body image rested only on the crowns of the outer fibrils, no more than a few microns deep. This contradicted every forgery hypothesis. A medieval artist would have applied pigment over blood, smudging or staining it. No medieval technique could create an image after blood was already present. especially not a surface-only image with no pigment binders whatsoever. Scientists tried to replicate the superficiality using lasers, heating elements, reactive gases, and ultraviolet energy bursts. Some experiments succeeded in matching one characteristic. None matched all simultaneously. Every attempt failed at the exact point where the shroud remained firm. AI did not deliver a solution, but it unveiled something more unsettling. The shroud's image behaves like no known artistic, chemical, or natural process. It behaves like a phenomenon, one we have not yet categorized. It saw data, and what it extracted was something no human researcher had ever detected. Patterns too precise to be accidental, geometry too disciplined to be natural, and an order that suggested intelligence woven into decay. The silent debate inside the scientific underground. Beyond the media headlines, beyond the clash of skeptics and believers, lies a quieter world, a hidden network of experts who study the shroud without publicity, without press releases, without the burden of defending a worldview. In private email threads and encrypted folders, physicists, geologists, chemists, imaging specialists, textile historians, and forensic analysts exchange observations with a level of caution rarely seen in modern science. Their conversations do not resemble debates. They resemble the whispering of people who have stumbled upon a problem that refuses to fit into any known category. AI's findings circulated through this underground community slowly, almost reluctantly. Every claim was interrogated with ruthless intensity. Many hoped the algorithms were overfitting, finding imaginary patterns in noise. But the more independent teams tested the datasets, the more stubborn the geometry became. It resisted breakage. It resisted randomization. It resisted erasure. Control tests with linens aged in ovens, exposed to smoke, dipped in herbal solutions, and subjected to controlled burns revealed nothing remotely similar. This led to phrases that made even seasoned scientists uncomfortable. One team called it a decaying geometric signal, as if the cloth were slowly releasing the fingerprint of an event long past. Another labeled it spatial intelligence, implying the image carried an internal logic, something structured, not accidental. These were metaphors, not conclusions. Yet metaphors matter when language fails. Scientists tend to avoid poetic terms unless they are wrestling with something they cannot classify. Meanwhile, theologians responded in predictable ways, some celebrating, others urging humility. But the scientific underground did not care about theology. Their discomfort came from a different place. The shroud was beginning to look unique. Uniqueness is the enemy of science. It defies replication. It breaks the rules of method. So researchers began asking a bold question behind closed doors. What if the shroud has siblings? Could faint images on ancient linens exist in museums, misclassified as stains or burns? Could forgotten burial cloths in ossuaries, monasteries, or private collections show similar superficial discoloration? Could AI scour global textile archives and identify overlooked cousins? If even one parallel artifact appears, the shroud becomes natural, exceptional, but not singular. If none appear, the shroud becomes something else entirely, a solitary anomaly, a lone event, a mystery without family. And that is the outcome scientists fear most, because a phenomenon without parallels threatens the very architecture of scientific classification. The event we cannot name. This is where the shroud forces the most uncomfortable question in modern science. What if the shroud records a physical event that humanity does not yet have the vocabulary or the physics to describe? Scientists do not fear the supernatural, they fear the unclassified. Category collapse. The shroud's image demonstrates characteristics belonging to no existing imaging process. It is superficial, yet uniform, microscopically shallow, yet macroscopically coherent, distance correlated, yet pigment-free, geometric, yet untooled, simultaneously biological and topographical. It behaves like the afterglow of an event, an interaction between object and cloth that should not exist using known mechanisms. Some propose ultraviolet bursts, but UV burns penetrate deeper than the shroud's microns thin image. Others propose corona discharge, but corona effects scatter irregularly, unlike the shroud's soft, consistent shading. Still others propose vapor diffusion, but vapors blur. They do not produce detailed 3D relief. Each theory solves one piece and breaks another. Thus, scientists face an intellectual terror, Not that the shroud proves resurrection, but that it refuses to be reduced. It might represent a moment in history where physics behaved in a way it does not behave today, or in a way we have not yet understood. A moment not necessarily supernatural, but unrepeatable under present knowledge. That possibility rattles the scientific mind. It suggests that the limits of our understanding are not the limits of reality, and so the shroud becomes a mirror. Believers see divinity, skeptics see misinterpretation, scientists see anomaly, AI sees structure, historians see contradictions, the public sees mystery. But the shroud itself remains indifferent. It does not ask for belief or disbelief. It does not argue. It simply persists, quietly, stubbornly, defying certainty. Its real power lies not in answering questions, but in provoking them. What happened on that cloth? Why does the image behave like encoded geometry? Why does it show a phenomenon before the world had the language to describe one? Why does it remain reproducible in no laboratory? Why does it both reveal and conceal in the same breath? In the end, the Shroud of Turin stands as one of the rare objects that humbles every discipline that touches it. It humbles art, it humbles chemistry, it humbles physics, it humbles history, it humbles AI, it humbles belief, it humbles doubt. It reminds us that mystery is not the opposite of truth. Sometimes mystery is the beginning of it. If you think mystery deserves investigation, not fear, then don't leave this journey here. Subscribe, stay curious, and turn on notifications. The next discovery, the next decoded pattern, might be the one that breaks history open, and you won't want to miss what comes next.